Welcome to Expat Hoops. Today we travel 66 West, 81 South to talk with former James Madison University standout Kirby Burkholder. While at Madison, she was an All-CAA first-team pick and was the 2014 CAA Player of the Year as a senior. She averaged 18.6 points and 8.7 rebounds per game during her senior season to earn the conference's top honor. Kirby, welcome to Expat Hoops.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. First question, I'll put it this way. It'll sound funny probably, but especially as Mason alum, but why James Madison?
It was actually a late decision because they didn't kind of come around till later. And I had some other offers. Nowhere was really sticking out to me or like 100% sold until JMU came around. And it's still kind of funny because I always wanted to be like far away from home. I was like, I would never play in my hometown, even though I grew up watching them and everything. But just the coaching staff, I actually knew Coach Brooks for a long time because I was friends with his niece. So I'd been around him before, but in the basketball sense, not so much. And when they did, and I went to JMU, met the coaches, just kind of saw the program, I was sold pretty quickly. So when they offered, I accepted that. It just felt very like home.
Definitely seems like it was a good choice. As we talked off the pod, incredible run of success over multiple years for James Madison. So obviously it makes some level of success or some level of sense there for you to go. But you mentioned it earlier that you played for now current Virginia Tech head coach Kenny Brooks at JMU. What were your highlights at Madison as you would look back on your career there?
I mean, everything kind of, the biggest parts was my senior year, just everything about that team. Even the year before when we went to the WNIT championship, that was an exciting run. But then winning that CAA championship my senior year was more memorable to me than my freshman year, just a little more bigger role, more part in it. And then us going to the NCAA tournament, winning that first round was really exciting, and making it to the second round. And that was definitely my most memorable part of the career. But overall, I enjoyed really all of it. My freshman year was a little tougher, but senior year, again, a lot more memorable. Player of the Year award was, I guess my biggest highlight. But overall, that team and everyone with that whole team and the whole season this senior year was pretty special.
All right, so your college career wraps up. You accomplish a lot while you're there, but as you're going along in your college career, when is the first time where you think, okay, you are going to try to play professionally somewhere after college and see what the opportunities are like?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was exactly sophomore or junior year, maybe towards the end of the sophomore season, like going into that junior year. Like I said, my freshman year had been a big transition, kind of a struggle season. But I think once I got going sophomore year, maybe going into junior, I was like, okay, I could see the potential. I'm actually like not 100% sure when I like really knew, but I think that was really the goal at that time, thinking I could play at the next level.
And you had a period in which you were trying to get into the WNBA with the Mystics, correct?
Yeah, everything kind of just flowed for me. So I, didn't know if that was going to happen, but right during my senior year, I knew I was gaining a lot of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, recognition, I guess. So it kind of, you can't be contacted and everything during that senior season. So kind of everything happens really fast right after. So I had just, had an agent. That whole process took place pretty much right after you lose in the tournament and you're done and eligible. And then from there, it was like, yeah, we're going to just see how it goes. And I didn't get drafted. It was like a potential to go, but it didn't get drafted. But then immediately after the draft, got the phone call about getting into training camp with the Mystics. So I was just like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to go. I remember going up a little early, get a few workouts in, and then went to the training camp, it was a cool experience. It didn't work out. It's pretty tough to get in there. So I was a little bummed, you know, to get released and everything, but again, everything happened quickly. I think a week later I got the Italian deal, so I was looking forward to that. And then from there, it's just went for the rest of my career.
Did you have other choices? I mean, what were your choices, I guess, with going into your first year playing overseas?
That was just the first that came about, and I was like, Italy, that sounds awesome. I took it. So I didn't even look at any other options at that point. And the Italian league is a good league. So I felt all around good with it. Just, it was the first thing my agent brought to me, and I was like, that sounds great, and I'll take it.
Actually, I kind of wanted to jump back. So two things that you kind of brought up that I think are kind of some interesting stories that we get into, the agent process, and also not necessarily being drafted with the Mystics, but in terms of, you said it was phone call almost like right away. Did you have an idea that, you know, which teams were going to be interested and potentially could make that call? And was it something that was fairly clear that that the Mystics were interested, that even if they didn't get drafted, that they'd probably be giving you a look?
No, actually, like none of it was really clear. And at that point also, like Coach Brooks had some experience with Tamara Young, but besides that, and a few other players had dabbled, Dawn Evans and a few other players had dabbled in the pro world, but not a ton of experience and knowledge. So it was still like everything was just kind of unknown and like not 100% great with how the process was going. But with the agent situation, you do have kind of all of a sudden some agents contacting, like I had no idea. So I did lean on Coach Brooks a lot to the best of his knowledge, or like former players. And then when I did go with mine, I remember like one thing he told me was he was an agent in the business for like 30 years. And he was like, I still cannot tell you like how it's going to go. He's like, you know, a third of it's politics, a third of it's talent, a third of it's who you know and who owes someone a favor, and it kind of can just go any way. And I don't think he could really gauge. I think they were trying to focus on the Washington team just because I was a little more local, and I think they might have knew. I think they did have me on their radar, but yeah, nothing was really for certain. I was just kind of watching, and if it happened, it happened. If it didn't, then I was just take the next steps.
And so you ended up in Italy after all that. Tell us about that, your experience going over to Italy when you first landed there.
It was unique. I think looking back, it's funny because every first year player that I know, it's like it's a big culture shock no matter where you are. Just it's so different than what you're used to. And my specific town in Italy was a very small town, borderline village. So my first like eyes of Europe was like, wow, I'm really in like a village. It was very different, but I was still excited. And it was actually tough. It was one of my favorite years looking back, but also one of the toughest. Just like I think first year is really tough for people. You're away from home, like really away from home. It's different than kind of being away from home in the States. You're like in a different country, just learning all the different foreign differences of the language barrier, the time difference. Professional basketball and European basketball is different than collegiate American basketball. So it's like all these things thrown at you at one time. But I also had like the experiences of a lifetime doing so much stuff in Italy, and that I love that. So it's kind of like all over the board, but overall one of my like favorite experiences.
And so you had that right off the bat, one of your favorite experiences, which is nice. It's I guess that's a great way to start off a time in Europe, but
also tough. I remember like our coach, I do remember there was moments like, I don't know if this is for me, calling home a lot. So thankfully a good support system and just sticking it out, because it did get better, but like everyone kind of, there's always crazy coaches you say in Europe, but like a very interesting coach. He ended up getting fired, which made things a lot better. But yeah, it was still kind of a crazy first experience, but at the same time good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. It sounds like you weren't a particular fan of your coach while you were there, but everything else was in pretty good shape, all said.
Yeah.
And so compare that to Belgium, your next stop.
Belgium, it was at first really great. I love the city. I didn't get to play too much there. I was actually a short stint in Belgium because everything was going great. It's just that was my first experience of, wow, this is a business. Because I don't know, 2.5 months in, got a call from my agent like, hey, this team wants to cut you and this other girl, which you have no cut contracts. And it was just like, it just came out of nowhere. I think leading the team at that point in all of our games, like, or one of the leaders of points. And so it was just like, I was not playing bad. So I was like, what's going on? But it's kind of like, I think everyone also who's played a few years has a story like this, where you just have these situations where it's just like some business thing. I know they wanted to bring back a different player that had formerly played for them that got cut from a different team. And they didn't have space. So I think they're trying to just make space. I'm not sure, but at that point, it's not really a coach's decision. It's the president's decision. So I went through a rough time with that. And it was kind of gotten to an ugly battle, because if they cut you, they are technically supposed to pay out your whole season. They can try to play games and try to like do you dirty and try to find ways. So ultimately we ended up making a deal to pay me up to a certain point and then also release my papers, because teams will try to hold your papers sometime. That we could get all into that, but eventually I left there on an agreement, and I did not play anywhere the rest of that season.
I was gonna say, if you want to go into that, please do.
Oh, it's just like the dirty side of it. There's a lot of dirty side of the business in Europe. So like that's why I was saying, I think any player you talk to who played it for a good amount of years, they're going to have something like that. And I don't know if you've seen, like, there's a recent thing going on around with one of the men's teams of some craziness with the president saying something. So it was, again, I can remember when you get terminated, you still have to like show up and do your part until they send you a physical termination paper. So they would try to, and all of this at the time, I'm like, this is so crazy, like how could they do this to people? But like now it's like, okay, we know teams do this stuff all the time. Like and my agent, thankfully I had a good agent guiding me through it at the time. He was like, you guys still need to go to practice. And I was kind of lucky to have another girl. We were both going through it because they were doing it to both of us, but they were like trying to tell us, don't go to practice, don't show up, which would have been like a breach on our end. So, we were going to practice, it's pretty awkward. But we would still show up to practice. And I remember having like meetings with the president and our coach, but like our coach was really like just sitting there, and the president, trying to lie to us about signing certain papers, telling us our agent, gave him permission for us to sign papers. And like thankfully my agent had told me ahead of time, like, don't sign. But it's just like, for me, for that first time just going through this stuff, like team or presidents of a team doing that and telling you all these things and lying, and like it was just like, I was like, what is this? Like and you're over there just in a foreign country dealing with these things alone. The president was like this big lawyer, so we're in this big like lawyer's office, and like then they get angry when you don't kind of like go with what they're trying to do. So it was quite an experience. I think at that moment, after I had figured everything out, went home for a little bit, I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure if overseas is for me. This was just like a little much. But you eventually just kind of grow and learn how to deal with all those things. And it's like part of unfortunately, the business rough side of the overseas game.
And that is an actually interesting experience, because we've heard from some other people that when they start getting into those disputes, that they took the approach that, fortunately, I don't think it's harmed them, but they have taken the approach where they're not going to practices and they would show up for games. And it, fortunately, I guess, didn't backfire on them, but
so that's probably a payment thing, because I've had that as well. If they're late on their payments, then you're allowed to not go to practice.
Okay.
Or play, and some people you could choose to play or not. But I actually had that this season in Poland. We had to sit out so that we could get paid eventually. Some teams try to push the limits on that or take advantage, and a lot of times you got to sit out even though there's always a grace period. So they're late on their payment, then they have like another 21 days, whatever your contract says. And then at that point you send them a letter, another week. And then if they still don't, then you turn to sitting out, and then somehow the money usually comes pretty quickly after that. If they want you to play. So.
And this is maybe just an aside. I know, you're not a labor lawyer, particularly not one in Europe, but I was sitting here thinking, we've heard stories like this from most of our guests, something like this, a pay dispute, something along those lines. They're playing overseas. This happens more often than not, it seems like, especially when you're in the mid-tier, European teams, that kind of stuff. Unless you're in the really, really upper echelon, it seems like this is a recurring problem.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot is made about the labor situation in the U.S., but it does seem like the U.S. at its upper tiers, there is at least some unionization here. I don't get a sense that there's anything like that in European sports. Is that right?
Yeah. I think the only place that's like you're 100% solid is like France. That's by far the most elite league as far as like, because everything is controlled with their government there. So, you're going to be taken care of 100%, no money issues, because everything runs their government. And I think every other league it just depends on like the integrity of your club and organization, and kind of certain countries get certain reps, for how they handle things. But outside of France, it's up in the air a lot of times.
So after all that, you went to Hungary and you got hurt. So tell us about that.
Not my first year, but my second year.
Your second year. Okay.
Yeah.
So your first year, how are things in Hungary then?
So it was good. I went to Hungary, and that was off a little bit of time off because I didn't go back for the second half of the season after Belgium. But so it was like a whole different vibe of a different country. But the Hungarian league is actually a pretty good league, which I think some people know, some people don't know. But I had a really good coach who is now the coach of Sopron, which is a EuroLeague team in Hungary. So they're really good. But we kind of got lucky with him, I think, because it was his first year after playing him, just starting out. So he was probably one of the best coaches I've played for in my overseas career. And our team wasn't the strongest, but it was a good season. And I was on a team where I could like really play well and shine and have to kind of take over a little more, which ended up leading to me getting a good deal after that on a Euro Cup team there. And
this was still, though, in Hungary, in the same country.
Yeah.
So is that the team you ended up getting injured with?
Yes.
So tell us about your experience being injured in Hungary, what that process was like with the comeback. If you could compare it to what that might be like for an American team.
Well, being injured in college is prime time to get injured if you're going to get injured, not in a foreign country. I've never been injured, so that probably also was like, it was just a whole new experience for me. But thankfully I was with a really solid team, because I can't imagine getting injured like with the team I was just on this year. But I was on a really solid team. It sucked because that was probably one of my best seasons overall, and playing really well and playing well in Euro Cup. I think if I would have been healthy for that season, I would have like been on a good path. But yeah, I got injured, and so everything up to that point I had to decide, coming back home or staying there. But I felt comfortable. I had an agent that was in that country, so like got to do my own research, talk around finding a surgeon, meet with him in the city of Budapest. So I felt good with everything. My mom flew over for the surgery, and like up to that point, it was devastating being injured, but like everything was smooth. The whole surgery process was okay. It's definitely difficult in a foreign country, just like you have your language barrier, just some
especially with Hungarian. You don't pick up Hungarian very easily.
Yeah.
And Hungarians generally don't have that expectation that you will either.
Yeah. So my surgeon spoke English, so I felt comfortable like speaking with him and everything. But like once in the hospital, like the nurses didn't speak English, so like you're Google translating things, and like Hungary's a little like I remember after surgery, you don't get like pain meds outside of like a stronger Tylenol there, because like Hungary is like a lot of those things are just banned. Like you can't get what we would get. I remember my like nerve block wearing off and like me trying to get more pain meds, and they're just like they brought me like a saline drip, and so that first night in the hospital wasn't like fun compared to like at home, and it just wasn't like fully comfortable. And I still think it would have been fine. My team there, DVTK, handled everything like really great. The manager, you know, they were bringing me everything I needed, had a really good PT lady there, but I just personally had some complications from that surgery, which was difficult to deal with there. And just, again, the language barrier, after my mom left, like it's just really uncomfortable to go through some hard stuff. I still had good teammates and everything, but it just wasn't ideal. And I couldn't fly home till like a 6-week point because of the rules for the surgery, but it was tough. So at that point, it became like, oh, not a fun situation to be in a foreign country dealing with. I think if things would have went smooth and everything, it would have been fine, but it didn't. So it made it a lot worse. So I couldn't wait to get home.
So there's the year in Hungary where you had the ACL injury, complication coming back, go back to Hungary, and then COVID strikes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about what your COVID experience was. Pretty much everybody, that's almost mandatory at this point. What's your COVID experience like?
Yeah. So it was, I got back. It was like a good year because I felt really good after being out for so long. And then we were almost through our regular season. We're at the very end of it. I think we just had one game left of regular season. And it just happened so fast. Like we had our game scheduled that like end of the week. And I think it was beginning of the week. And there was like, you know, other countries were doing certain things. So we weren't really sure what was going on. And even I'm sure the same with all of you all, like it just went from 0 to 100 really quick with COVID. And then it was like, okay, there won't be fans, but we hadn't even gotten to our game where it was like, okay, the game's probably canceled. I remember Hungary was like one of the last leagues out of all of the European leagues. The commissioner was like skiing in Austria, and I remember just like Spain or whatever, Italy and Turkey and every country was like shutting down. People were flying home, and we're like all just waiting. And like, you know, in the beginning, looking back now, it was fine, but like at that time, you're like kind of panicking. And then like they did the travel ban, which didn't affect people getting home, but it just was like everything was just kind of like freaking everyone out. Then finally they did cancel, and it was a little difficult to get the flights home. Like a couple of them got canceled, and I was like stressed at the time a little bit, but like it wasn't really necessary looking back. Like we were always going to get home, but you know, you just didn't know what was going to happen. You heard of like borders closing and airports closing, but everything was fine eventually. Then I just came home, and then it was just a long time and tough time after that. Like courts, sports closed down. But yeah, that was how it went in Hungary.
Man, that is that's just a lot of bad luck. I mean, I was trying to describe what your experience is in Hungary, and it seems like that you really would have enjoyed playing a lot more in Hungary, but you just had bad luck for like 2 straight years. It was not good.
Yeah, it's weird because I still thoroughly enjoyed my time in Hungary. Get a lot of joy out of the other experience of traveling. I met a lot of like great people there. I had just a lot of good times in Hungary. And then but there was also a lot of hard. I think it could have been even better, obviously, if like that second year didn't tear my ACL. And then it was like I had even longer than the average time of getting back, and I finally get back, and then COVID hit. So I think just not necessarily Hungary, but just that little 3-year life sense was a tough tough time just so in my career wise with so much, I call it limbo time of like I wasn't playing and was, home recovering for so long. And then once I did, you're trying to do little stuff to keep yourself afloat. And then you're also trying to get back. Then you get back and then, COVID hits right when you're getting back. So then you're in another limbo mode for, I don't know, it was 7-8 months before, because I didn't go back in the beginning this season. I didn't go back till December. So that was March to December. I think that's 7 months.
And you are
just
currently
limbo. So it was just like a lot of limbo.
You alluded to your experience in Poland, though, and things didn't go quite as you wanted. Tell us about your time there.
Yeah, I would say that's there's been, I think no matter what, even if you have good seasons, there's tough times with overseas basketball. It's just
you seem to have a few more of those than you would like, though.
Yeah, but I think it's like part of it. Like, I don't think there's ever really like perfect seasons overseas. Maybe if you're on these like really top tier teams, but even people I know like in good teams, good league, a good country, which I'm not saying any of these are bad countries, but like a French top league, they're, they have their issues. It's just kind of how it goes. But Poland, I would say, was my least favorite, although I'm still thankful to like have went and had some little time to play. But on top, COVID is just hard. Every single friend or player that I know this year is like, it's a very tough year no matter what. You're just most of the 20 hours a day in your apartment, 4 hours maybe or less out at practice. Poland, for instance, was like shut down. You couldn't go out to eat, you couldn't do anything. Like here in the States, you can at least kind of like do a little bit more, but there just felt very isolated, more than normal. And on top of that, a very interesting team management there. And it's kind of apparently known that that place has a lot of issues, but I didn't know that prior to that. And I can vouch for that. It's just not ran very well. So it was very tough. And then I had, again, some more situations. Like I went, because we got the offer and we had to make a decision in one day to take it or not. And then flew there 2 days later because they wanted us there for a game that when we arrived, we were playing 1 day later, which is not ideal. I did not want to do that. You can just hear that and know it's like, this is like a setup to an injury or something. But it was like, okay, take it or leave it. At that point, it's like a risk I was willing to take to be able to go play. And I did actually get injured that first game. I played through it. It wasn't a major injury, but I tweaked my meniscus. So a little part is like torn, I guess.
That's a minor injury.
So I actually took like a month or so to rehab, but it started just from that. And it just, they didn't handle the injury, in my opinion, well. Everything was like pulling teeth with that team. For instance, we didn't even have a coach. We had an older player who was playing, and once the regular coach had left, she took over as the coach, but she was also playing. So like, it was just very interesting. Everything was interesting that season.
Interesting.
Very difficult and it was not like the games, some of the games were like, it was nice to be playing and fun, but outside of that, which was majority of your time, it was pretty tough there. But you gotta get through it, and I got through it. We didn't make playoffs, and I can't say I'm super upset that I had to come home. Loved it.
So I was gonna ask, so you got to finish the season. Your season wasn't pushed back or anything because of COVID or anything? No, you got to finish.
Yeah, we got tested on arrival, which I'm not even sure. I've never heard of. We got a blood prick test. I'm not sure if that's real or not, but that's what we got.
But you got it.
Yeah, and then we didn't get tested again the whole time. Like it's very like minor. I feel like safety protocols there in Poland. If someone had COVID or something, like found out that they had it, yeah, then your team would have to like quarantine. But as far as anything else, like, yeah, we just played, like we never got tested. We just played every day, hoped no one got sick. that was it. So yeah, they didn't really ever stop. I think prior to us getting there, like I think here and there a team would have to like be out or just miss a game and they would reschedule it. But they moved it along pretty well, I think, compared to most countries.
Yeah, I would say, because I think that here in Iceland, our the final game would be the middle of June. And that just makes for such a long season.
Yeah, that's so long. So even with the playoffs, like they should be finishing early, mid-April, depending on how far the teams make it, which is pretty early still.
Yeah.
So you're back home. And what's next, I guess, is the final question that I would have for you as you're going forward. You had some bad luck, had a more recent experience that was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
What are your considerations
for the future going forward?
Yeah, that's kind of still in the process. I was like, let me get home and kind of relax a little from that season, because it was mentally draining, I would say, more than anything. A little physically too, because of my knee, but mentally very draining. And I just want to kind of recoup from that. And I'm just kind of exploring all options. So I don't know 100%, but it should be, according to my agent, nothing as bad as this past season for basketball in general. So I'm still I'm kind of just seeing what's potentially next. It's like most places are still going. So like the markets and stuff aren't really super moving right now. And there's still a couple countries like that aren't sure if they're having a league, but I'm kind of just feeling it. I think I would like to play again, like even if it's not a whole season somewhere or the full 8 month, or like somewhere that has a little bit smaller, or go a little later or something, but I'm not 100% sure yet what will be next, but I hope to play something in the next season.
Thank you for watching this episode of Expat Hoops. We have a lot more videos that you can watch at this point in time. You can find one recommended for you right here. We also have a lot on our channel that you can go back and watch whatever episode you want at this point in time. You can even watch the Expat Extras. That's stuff where you can find stuff that is unique. It's something you won't find on our normal audio podcast. It's something different. We've got lots of great stories there. You're gonna want to check that out. Throwing us a subscribe down somewhere here somewhere, or even the little subscribe button that lets you know that you're subscribed to Expat Hoops. It means that you're going to be notified when something is new, something's different. You're going to want to do it. It's just what are you waiting for? Just do it.